Entertainment. Entertainment is highly unionized. Very, very highly. Now, with the advent of the electronic world and computers, entertainment, and some of that is what we used to consider the entertainment as a part of music is gone into equipment, machines, and computers, and not in terms of live performance. The problem is, and we were talking about it coming down here today, the Metropolitan Opera used to come to Detroit. It doesn't do that anymore. It's too expensive. And if you think about the theft of music and whatever, where is the money? It's shifted all over. So what is a highly, highly organized area in service is now starting to decrease and become very vulnerable. Professional sports. Professional sports basically is 100% unionized. Even I know we don't think about soccer much in America, but even the Professional Soccer League is unionized. Actually, we had a strike. I know you didn't feel it and didn't hear it because we don't think about soccer, but they are all organized. Professional employees, and I'm talking about every kind of profession you can imagine, from doctors to whatever fits that legal category, are highly, highly organized. Doctors are, and you have to make a distinction between what is being unionized and what is being unionized, and we'll talk a little bit later. A doctor, he or she may belong to the American Medical Association, which is basically a union. But they also belong to unions. Could be public workers. Now, most of the doctors that I'm aware of that are unionized are with public sector unions because they in effect organize state systems, public health systems, social service systems, mental hospitals, publicly owned hospitals, those kind of things. So again, I find high concentrations in the public sector irrespective of category. Why? Because the political opposition has not been there. It's starting to develop now. When one of the candidates for governor in Michigan, well, thank God he ended up last, goes on television in Michigan with a right-to-work ad, vote for me because I'll make it a right-to-work state, you know, 5 years ago, that would have been the end of your life. And it wasn't. Well, it was the end of his political life, but what can I tell you? Now, wholesale trades and retail trades, and I put those together, they are very poorly organized, but they are very heavily organized in certain particular companies. And so if I looked at food by itself, many of the larger chains and names that we're used to are totally unionized, from a Kroger's to whatever. But there are some huge ones called Winn-Dixie, which are in the South, that are not unionized. Why haven't we been completely successful in this area? And I want, next time you walk through a large grocery store, I want you to think about it differently in terms of why it is and why it isn't. What's the difference between a non-union store and a union store? In our state, we have Myers, which is also in several states, heavily unionized except for one store in Traverse City, and there's a story to that. In a food, at best, brings less than 0.5% profit. Those stores don't make their money with food. They make it with those other items in it, the clothing. And if you'll ever notice how the checkout stands are here, the food is here. And as you go out, you pass through the clothing. And what do they expect? You will buy things. And that's how they make their money. The difference between, so I don't care if it's a union store or a non-union store, basically the food doesn't pay for itself. It is a loss leader. So consequently, when like the United Food and Commercial Workers and some of the big unions in this area organize a place, if they organize all of Kroger's, and they give, as an example, Myers, which is the big chain in Michigan and the Midwest stores, if they give those two people different contracts, you understand now Myers is mad at the United Food and Commercial Workers and think that Kroger got a deal. And that is a serious problem for that union because it's one big union, or Teamsters are there too, but but it's very difficult for them in that in a competitive position. Those contracts, if they are not almost perfectly identical, because of the nature of the profit levels, it doesn't work. So when you're in that union, you're playing a very delicate game. It has to be the same. And the people at Kroger's want something more than the people at Myers, and vice versa. And trying to explain that to people are very difficult, if not impossible. There's a lot of complications with, there's an issue of who's management. In the private sector, we know who the manager is because it's designated by law. In the public sector, those same titles are union people, but they have to be in a different union. But I'll hit those. There's a lot of different things. But what I want you to think about is why his service in the short span of from 1970 to 2000 started to contract and we went somewhere else. I want you, when I go through this, to think of we've returned to the craft industry in the service industry. And that's going to sound strange to you, but I want to show you what actually happened. First of all, seniority in the service industry decreased in importance. And it was not a case of my sitting there and hearing somebody say, and this happened, this is the first sign of it. The young worker said, I don't give a whatever because you've been here 30 years, old man. I want off third shift. I want first shift. And the older worker would say, what do you mean? I spent 30 years getting to first shift and you want it now because you've been here 6 months? Well, that was the first sign of that little, and it's always been there, but now as the workforce changes in the composition, and it's not all youth, but it's people that may not have been used to the unionization and the concept of seniority as it's been used in the past, all of a sudden we have a decrease in it in terms of its effectiveness. But we also saw something else happened. Training and education has increased in importance. Now remember, each one of these economies had a power source. In the craft industry, it was a scarcity of my skill. In the mass production area, it was what? It was the political power, okay? Well, what's the power going to be here? Well, it's turned out it's training and education, the very reason we are here. Historically, you have been. The crafts more so than some of the mass production. You are in the best position to know what is needed. You're in the best position to provide it in a format with educators that relate to workers. You're in the best position to have the delivery. Why aren't we doing it? That's what this is all about. But we fumble with it a great deal, and we're going to have to get used to not doing that. And if you look at my information box, my little statement really depicts what has happened. At night, I take my knowledge home with me. At night in a mass production economy, I leave my machine at the work site. Management has not quite figured out that when I go home, if I don't come back, they have lost a portion of their intellectual property. Most organizations have intellectual property now. It's not a table and a chair. They don't count. It's you. And if you don't come back, what am I going to do? They will say all kinds of things in this economy about you, you, the collective you, but in essence, what it is when you go, you're gone. You took everything with you. Now, there's some things now, and I want you to think about the craft industry as I share with you what comes next. We have a return to the crafts. Within the service sector, we have many people who fit the description of a profession or a professional. And then I say, okay, is that the new craft? Registered nurse. How does one become a registered nurse?